fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eryk Pruitt, David Lord Martino, John Copenhagen, and Al Warren. 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren with a cold and all, and Mr. John Copenhagen. Hafer is back.
Hey, Al.
I was going to say, you're back from the coronation. How was that?
It was gilded and stuffy. I don't know. I feel like there's nothing like watching it on TV to make you realize how I don't understand it in an essential kind of way. I just don't. And so but it's kind of fun to be this outsider. You're like, oh, I'm such an American. Like, I really just don't understand this, But people are very passionate about it, and which is cool too. It's just so interesting. I just don't get it though. And I guess some of the other royals don't get it either. But
hey, listen, but I thought you were invited. I thought you were supposed to show up. You were one of the guys carrying the king's train.
Oh no! I did not get invited.
Oh.
I'm not that special, Al.
I can't figure out. Everyone's. I was waiting for Kid Rock to start shooting up the British beer.
Oh, jeez.
He had a longer train than most wedding brides, and he had more makeup than most brides. So I thought for sure they'd be shooting that up or something. I don't know. Got to be upset about something. Anyway, now speaking of makeup and long trains, we've got an author today, and let's talk to him. He's got a new book coming out, and it's James D.F. Hanna. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing today?
I love that accent. That almost made my nipples hard.
Oh, dear.
This is interesting. You're right down my alley here with your books, your writing and stuff like that. I find it very, very curious. You're writing a Malone series here, and so it's basically a Seamus series. It's like a detective, if I'm right.
Yeah, it's a PI series set in southern West Virginia. Henry's a former West Virginia state trooper who was shot in the line of duty and is a recovering alcoholic. It's just kind of a personal mess, and is basically the books are PI novels set in Appalachia, where I grew up. Because the Night is number 6.
How do you decide when you're doing a series like that? How do you put that together in your mind? Are you do you kind of know ahead of time how many books and how many things you want your characters to go through, or how far you develop them? Is this all kind of pre-planned?
No. So when I started writing the books in 2015 or so, it was really just kind of the effort to finally finish a whole book. And then just as time progressed, I didn't have a story arc per se. I wasn't like, let's, lead this to this to this to this or anything like that. But somewhere around the 4th book, I kind of started seeing, okay, I think I wanted to change some stuff with Henry. I really like to put him through the ringer. I like to make him suffer as much as possible. And so with the 5th book, Behind the Wall of Sleep, that was where I figured out he was going to possibly run for sheriff. He lives in Parker County, West Virginia, and so decided, okay, so he's going to run for sheriff. He's being funded, his campaign's being funded by the guy who owns the local strip club, a guy named Bada Bingham. And so then book 6 really became sort of like him dealing with the actual campaign, and also kind of bringing together sort of a resolution to those 3 books, 4, 5, and 6, and setting up whatever I decide to do with the rest of books. With the rest of the series, however long that goes.
Well, so why is it you want to make him suffer? Like, who is he? Is this like someone you know in real life?
So I am told by people who claim to be my friend that they read the books and they're like, wow, Henry sounds a lot like you, and he's kind of a jerk. And I'm like, gosh, thanks. We're not getting a book dedicated to you now. So I was very much a reader of PI fiction growing up. And I read in that second wave of PI novels that came with with Spencer, with Robert B. Parker. And, the guys like Parker, Pronzini, Lawrence Block, obviously, female writers like Marcia Muller, Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, the folks who were really kind of changing that voice. And they, where the PI got to be, he got to have a deeper well of emotion. He got, or she, they had complicated lives. They weren't only about the case the way that old school private eyes were, in the Chandler Hammett mode. But conversely, I never wanted Henry to be the smartest guy in the room. I wanted to try and flip that paradigm of where, like, the PI is always the toughest guy or the smartest guy. Henry is not the toughest guy. He is not the smartest guy. He is never the smartest guy in the room. What he is the guy who doesn't know when to stop. And even when he does try to, there's that part of him that won't let himself stop. And so with that comes, him just being pushed further and harder into increasingly dangerous circumstances and situations. And out of that, I hope there comes growth for him, because in the first book, he is very much a jerk because he's struggling with his drinking. He struggles with, he doesn't have the identity of being a state trooper anymore. His wife has left him. He's very much a wreck. And so by, book 6, his life is steadier, and he's trying to define himself in a different way, possibly by becoming sheriff, but it's not going to be that easy for him, obviously.
How do you come up with the dialogue in a story like this? Like, I'd imagine you don't live like the main character. You're not in the same world as he is. So how is it you create that dialogue?
I shamelessly rip off conversations I have with friends.
Oh, good.
Seriously, one of my best friends read Behind the Wall of Sleep, read book 5, and they were like, how many of these conversations did you just take verbatim that we have had? I was like, at least 4. But no, which is not even a joke. But as far as dialogue goes, honestly, I kind of go with that Aaron Sorkin rule. I like to hear smart people say smart things, or things which are funny, at least. I'm really about rhythm in dialogue. I like the rat-a-tat-tat, very much of that Elmore Leonard school, where you'll drop in and you'll read a Leonard novel just for the dialogue sometimes. And that's a thing I really strive for, is because I want that very specific rhythm between characters.
How do you experience that? Are you actually hearing your characters and their dialogue in your head, or not? Like, are you that type of writer?
I am completely. I always say that it's basically all just transcribing the voices in my head. And it is very much. I know, I don't always know what the characters are going to say. I mean, like, literally there are points where I'm surprised by the stuff that comes out of, their mouths, I guess is the right word. I'm surprised sometimes by what shows up on the page, which is always great. I mean, anytime you're surprising yourself, and you're the creator of this particular world, and you're surprising yourself, hopefully that then is entertaining for the reader.
You don't get into trouble when you're driving and you hear all these voices, like, you're not...
No, I'm not Son of Sammy out or anything.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to see if they let you drive or not.
It is, and so my phone, my notes app is just littered with chunks of dialogue, with descriptions, with little narrative. ideas and threads that just pop up, like when I'm out for a run, or just driving, like you said, like driving somewhere. These ideas, it just comes out of nowhere and shows up, and then it's, basically, because I'm a safe driver, I have to pull off to the side of the road and write stuff down on my phone, because I don't want to lose that.
It's amazing. I'm always in awe of writers that can do that, and it's like such a good habit to get in the, keeping whatever, however you do it, whether you do it on your phone or carry a little notebook around with you. I think it's like such a good idea. I am terrible at that. I'm just like, I just pretend I can remember things until I can sit down at my desk and jot them down. It's a terrible plan, so I'm always in all of that. So I have a question. I actually grew up in southwestern Virginia.
Okay.
And so I love of course, I'm just fascinated by, writing crime fiction in rural spaces. And, you said you grew up in southwestern West Virginia, is that right?
Yeah, southern West Virginia / eastern Kentucky.
Yeah, so that we're not probably, as a crow flies, we probably didn't grow up that far apart. But how can you talk a little bit about how that sort of influenced your writing, and maybe also like your writing crime books as well?
So that was really interesting because I'm three generations. The past three generations of my family were all like coal miners, railroad workers, tobacco farmers. I always have had a rural sensibility. I grew up in a holler in eastern Kentucky called Turkey Creek, and it is a holler. It is not a hollow.
Right.
And I always define a holler as that space between two mountains that God forgets about. But so growing up, though, like I said, I read a lot of crime fiction. I read Block. I read Ed McBain, Parker, Rex Stout. I read all of these very urban crime writers. All of these, everything set in big cities, set in LA, set in Boston, set in Philadelphia. And so when I tried to write, I didn't have a correlatory experience for any of that. I'd never, I never saw an escalator until my teen years. I grew up really small, super small town. I grew up in one of those eastern Kentucky towns where if the football team is traveling on Friday night, there's no one in town. Last one out, turn off the lights. But at that time, I didn't see any novels that felt that way. That felt like, they reflected that. Everything felt, you read Donald Westlake or, in his Richard Stark novels, and occasionally, Parker would be in a small town somewhere in the heights, but otherwise that was it. When I sat down, and so I spent years though, trying to write a big city novel, and I couldn't do it because I never lived in a big city. And then when I finally started a version of what eventually became Midnight Lullaby, which was the first Henry Malone novel, I realized, I'm just going to write this book in a Malo that I understand. I'm going to write it set it in a small town. I'm going to set it in one of these, 2 stoplight towns in West Virginia that I understand. And, that just, everything grew from that. Everything grew from the acceptance that I could write something about a small town. I could write about those people, which I understood more than trying to write about banking or stockbrokers or anything that felt metropolitan. But I could write about, those, the lonely stretches, between towns, where you're driving through the hills and the roads are barely wider than the width of your car. And, towns where basically everything shuts off at, 7 o'clock at night. And I got that. I understood that. And so I managed to do that for 6 of these, 6 Malone books and then a standalone that takes place in Parker County. I haven't lived in West Virginia in a few years now. That's still what I'm familiar. that is the environment I'm most familiar with, and so I'm still most comfortable writing about.
Is there something you wanted people to get out of this book, and even the series? Like, or when you do a book in a series and you finish it, is there some sort of subtext or meaning to the book?
I always say that I don't have my aspirations are strictly storytelling. I want the story to be entertaining. I want the characters to feel true. I want them to be entertaining and realistic. Even if they are exaggerated, I want them to feel real. I want people to not judge Appalachia, I think, the way that it has been judged in a lot of ways. We don't need a reckoning so much as an adjustment, probably. And I would like for people to understand there's a lot more to that area, to what I term cultural Appalachia, than they know or understand. I hope they get that. But more than anything, I want the book to be entertaining.
What is a good book to you? What keeps you reading?
So I am very much I'm very much into a lot of Southern writing right now, a lot of the new Southern war, I guess. You have someone like S.A. Cosby, who, has kind of proven to people that you can write about rural America and really just write a hard-edged crime novel that way. Guys like Eli Craner, Bobby Matthews, Mark Westmoreland, these guys who are writing, Kelly J. Ford, Amina Akhtar, Laura McHugh. I'm really drawn to the writers who are telling these rural stories and are telling them in a way that is respectful, that is different, that emphasizes a diversity, that doesn't just lean on the same, white guy tropes that have been, kind of bandied about within the genre for years. And they're all telling interesting stories within those areas that are very much about character. First and foremost, they're writing about these really deep, interesting characters who are relatable, regardless of, I think, if you're, from a city or from the country, you can read them and be drawn in. So I'm always about character and voice in whoever I'm reading. I want to read the strongest, most distinct voice with the strongest character.
You mentioned that there are things that folks are getting wrong about Appalachia, and I think this is really interesting because there's lots of things to talk about. I'm fascinated about this conversation, because I grew up there. And I strongly agree. I think that the world does get Appalachia wrong. I'm curious in what ways you think that's true. And I'm also curious generally about just rural fiction. Because I think there's like this specific things you get wrong about Appalachia, but there's also kind of things about general sort of assumptions about rural life that I think we get wrong. Anyway, what do you think? What are we getting wrong about Appalachia sometimes from the outside?
I think there's a lot of presumption with Appalachia that, like I'm right now, I'm reading a book called What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
By Kate. And, it's very much a response to Hillbilly Elegy, to J.D. Vance's book. And I think J.D. Vance J.D. Vance is a great example of someone who gets everything wrong about Appalachia. Because, one, I think there's this very whitewashed concept of what Appalachia is, but then it ignores that there's a lot more diversity to the area. I think there's this, Scotch-Irish mythology I think people really have to the area. That's what I said when I say cultural Appalachia. It's really that stretch from Virginia into Kentucky that goes down through, like Georgia and places like that, where, as opposed to like geographic Appalachia, which is, 2,000 miles or something like that. I think, there's this idea that, it's the tropes which have existed about Appalachia for for decades and decades and decades now, dating back to, the Hatfield McCoys, the Hatfields and the McCoys, that, everyone's basically, that people are still holding a grudge about that even is a thing that amuses the hell out of me. People think we're still fighting that. We're not. People think, there's a paradigm that people are not interested in bettering themselves, that they're lazy. And the truth is Appalachia is really just an area that has been maligned for so long and been created into the butt of jokes for so long that is as much the reason of why why Appalachians don't trust people. Why they, the scorn of the outsider is one of the great Appalachian tropes, which is not necessarily wrong, but it's also a self-defense mechanism, because more than anything, what I think Appalachians want is a chance, and, we're not just, all marrying cousins and drinking moonshine. There's a lot of great stuff that comes out of that area, and it just needs an opportunity to shine a little bit.
Yeah, Deliverance was a good movie.
Deliverance, Georgia, I would like to point this out.
You sure got a pretty mouth.
Oh.
Oh, anyway, yeah.
Talk about a movie that did do that, though. Like that certainly, and a book, of course, did a lot to sort of create a lot of the negative stereotypes that still haunt that area.
Oh,
and, I mean, not intentionally, I think.
How do you counter that when it's been done? Even the tropes that gay people get, and even all of the stuff. So it has been done for so many years. So how is it that you can wake people up, so to speak?
That's where I think you really do have, you have folks like Ford, you have these writers who are telling new stories, and they're telling different stories, and they're telling them from the viewpoints that people are not expecting. Sean has always told, Sean's told me the story before that, people didn't want him to write his first, people didn't want him writing about black experience in Virginia. In rural Virginia. No, they wanted like a big city crime novel. He was like, that's not who I am. He's telling his story, and he's telling a story that I think is very overlooked, is very often overlooked. I think then, when you have also then conversely, you have someone like Kelly, who I think is wonderful, and I think Copperheads is one of the best, Southern noir novels in the last probably 10 years. And she's talking about being a lesbian in the South, and is very, with this really strong individualistic voice. I think it becomes the accumulation of those voices. And I say this as a straight, cisgendered white guy who acknowledges, this is the story I'm telling. But what I really want is I do want this other diversity of stories, because for me, more diversity means better stories. Plurality, a greater diversity of voices is vital for good story, and not just good storytelling, but also for overall truth, so that we are creating those new, lack of a better term, tropes where, we can, it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, because where we got now didn't happen overnight. But it is that slow, Sherman's march, through Atlanta, essentially, of working to get rid of those old voices and replace them and show something that feels more honest and reflective of now.
I can't help but think that each time you write a book like this in this series, that it means a lot to you, even though you present it as entertainment and there's the underlying theme. But how do you think that each book in this series, as you complete it, changes you as a writer?
So I think every book it's very much its own distinct experience. So I wrote Behind the Wall of Sleep very quickly. the fifth book, the one that won the Shamus. I think I wrote it in like 3 months. When it came down to the time that I was trying to write Because the Night, that took 9 months, and that is 9 months after 2 years and probably trashing about 250,000 words to be able to finally get to this book. And so this book really changed me in a way that it made me more determined. It really made me want to keep pushing as a storyteller. Someone who's I consider myself very fortunate and privileged to get to do this. And this book, because it was so hard, because it was such a struggle, really just made me appreciate the ability to get to tell a story, to get to tell these stories, and to also kind of want to look at, what are some of the other stories I want to tell? What are some of the other journeys I think maybe I can put on a page? Probably, and explore with some different characters and see where that goes.
So I can't help but also think that the setting must be very important, being as you're talking about the location and how people are much more than what the country or even the world sees them as. How important is the setting to you? Are you writing it as if it's a character itself?
Very much so. I, like I said, I haven't lived in West Virginia for a while, but I'm constantly, so I still have a lot of friends who keep me up to date with everything, and I am the person who is on Google Maps all the time because I want everything to feel realistic. I want the terrain to feel true. I want, if someone from back home is reading this book and they're like, that's not how that would be, I'm going to hear about it. So I want the geography to feel true. I want it to feel culturally true, right? So, you do a lot of research about, say, like, the Italian population in Clarksburg, West Virginia, which was huge. And that, feeds into everything else. I'm never a big fan of this is my, when people say that, that the area becomes a character, the city becomes a character. But honestly, that's very true. Your storytelling is typically always reflected by where you're setting the story, by where you're setting the stage. And so getting all of that right, though, is really important to me. Because like you said, hundreds, at least 100 years of other people coming in and telling the Appalachian story, and now the opportunity to kind of get to tell an Appalachian story myself. That's important to get it right.
Well, maybe this is sort of part two of the same question, but, I do think, and I wonder if you would agree that it's setting is in part like its impact on character. So my question is, how do you go about building characters? What do you do to create a compelling character?
So I am a deeply instinctual writer. Honestly, as I'm starting to write, I have ideas, basically I'm working off of fragments of ideas. I kind of know, I have ideas about who the character is. Like with Henry, I didn't know a whole lot about him when I started writing about him. And so as I've written the books, it really is just, it's discovery. And again, it's like I said earlier, sometimes I'm surprised by the things that my characters say. Very often I am surprised by, where they end up traveling. Henry's girlfriend shows up in the second book, and I had no intention of her becoming his girlfriend until someone read the second book and they were like, so are they together in the third book? And I was like, well, I guess they are now. Because everything, again, it just goes back to a discovery process. That is, I'm not someone who does the really intricate outline or anything like that. I don't do character sketches. I am just going to the page and writing and writing and writing, and then eventually it starts to flow and it fits and it feels right, and the characters come into play, and I understand them more as it progressed.
Since it's detective fiction, though, you must is it difficult to sort of work out a plot? Because, I mean, I guess you're sort of more of a quote-unquote pantser as you sort of more exploratory writer. Do you ever have to rewrite a lot, or do you ever find yourself having to outline and do that kind of thing? I'm always fighting the two, like the instinctual writing with the more structured writing, so I'm curious what your process is.
Yeah, no, my process is a nightmare, John. It's just a complete and utter nightmare. Yeah, no, because I have pantsed my way through each one of these books, each one of the Malone books, and I rewrite extensively. I rewrite everything to within an inch. I have all of my, any short story I've written, any novel I've written, everything is rewritten. That whole concept of like the 3 drafts and you're done, I don't understand that, because I will go through 5, 6, 7 drafts. And again, it's rewriting for plot a lot of times. It is, I didn't know this person was the killer until now, but, I didn't know this was how this was going to turn out. So I'm always surprised, but, no, I rewrite so much. I rewrite just in insane amounts and cut whole swaths. So I'll tell you this, this is how much of a rewriter I am. I wrote an original draft of this book that was about 92,000 words. And then as I was rewriting it, I realized it was not good, like, at all. And so I shaved off, I took the first 8 or 10,000 words of it and wrote a completely different book. Had absolutely no bearing whatsoever to the original, to what I wrote originally. And most people would be like, that is insane, and they would be correct. Because it is a chaotic process to kind of go through. Now, I have a book that I just finished that is I'm in first draft. I'm getting ready to go back into revisions on it. And I did outline that. And now I'm realizing probably as I go into writing a second draft, a lot of it is going to be like shaving out, like there's too much plot, and it's like shaving out some of the plot, putting in some more character beats, kind of expanding some relationships. It is every book is a little different. Every book is a little different, I guess. I have not figured out though the really like, okay, I have a plot and I'm plotted out and I'm going to write it, and then just be, then you go back in the second draft and you're just fine-tuning things. I don't know how that works. God love the folks who do.
How do you know when it's done? It's over. It's finished. Is there something that happens? One of those voices calls you and said, hey, you're done.
I always say I know I'm done when I'm sick and tired of it. When I realize that any more editing, any more writing, any more whatever is just diminishing returns. There's nothing else I can do to it that is going to necessarily make it better. It is just, at this point, it's the creature that it is. And that's when I'm just sort of like, okay, I'm going to send this to an editor and let them deal with it now.
So your editors love you.
Oh yeah, no, deeply. No, this was actually this was an interesting experience for me because I self-published the first the Malone books originally, and I was self-published when Behind the Wall of Sleep won the Seamus, and then Down and Out Books when they picked the books back up and republished them. And so this was like my first real sort of, working with my publisher experience. And, whereas I kind of was, elbow deep in everything, doing everything myself. This was the first time that, I'm, coordinating everything with a publisher and working with that, working with the editors and things like that. It's been a really interesting experience. It's been a good experience. And I'm happy to be having to have the book ready to come out.
Well, give us the names of the people that you don't like in the company. We have someone on the line.
Right.
And they have something to say. No. Well, so do you like working with a publisher better than self-published, or what's your feeling on both?
So I do like it. It is a very different. It's a different experience because when you self-publish again, you're doing everything. So when I self-published, I did have I did hire a proofreader, but I was like formatting books myself. I have a graphic design background, so I was designing covers. Any promotion, anything was all on me. It is nice to work with a publisher and have the book done, and then just give it to them, and they work with it. They send me back some proofs. I do that. Go back. We figure out the cover. Self-publishing is great if you really have control issues, because you control it. Working with a publisher, and Down and Out, they're a fairly nimble group. With self-publishing, you might finish a book on a Monday, and then you put that book out the next Monday. There's actually, there was actually like 6 or 8 months between, I sent them the book and now it's coming out. Kind of working with that, not having all of that control and sense of autonomy has been different. But it's also been nice to, like I said, to give them the book, and then I can go and start working on something else. I'm not just sitting and sweating about the book and what's happening to it.
You ever go back to your earlier stuff and want to rewrite it?
So much so. And in fact, actually, so when Down and Out picked the books up, I did a gentle rewrite over a couple of them. I would really love someday to probably rework some stuff, because those were the learning books, so to speak. You're figuring out how to you're building the car while you're driving it, someone told me. And I think that's fairly true. You're learning the whole process as you're doing it. It's kind of like your own MFA program, so to speak. Though ultimately your professors are the reviews on Goodreads.
Scary thought.
Oh, terrifying.
So the bad characters, the evil people, the ones that do something wrong in the book, are you able to capture that person or people easily from all of your bad history yourself, or where does it come from?
So I think a lot of that is just sort of it's unmitigated id. It's taking all of those dark impulses that you have, but also, there's certain levels of truism, you have to be able to write. I think anytime you have an antagonist, I think someone told me once that your antagonist is the protagonist in his or her own mind of their own story. They're the good guy. And so really with any of the bad guys, I really try and approach it that way. They think they're doing whatever they're doing it for the right reasons in there. Which then makes whatever terrible thing they're doing in their minds justifiable, and probably therefore worse than if they were just like twirling a mustache and tying someone to train tracks.
Dating yourself there.
Oh yeah.
Snidely or wouldn't that? Well, so listen. So how do people find you? Where do you hang out? You're on street bars, corners, like what? Do you have a website, social media, hookup apps?
I have a table at a bar.
Yeah.
I have a table at a bar here in Louisville. So you can find me. I am on Twitter way more than I should, at least until Musk burns the joint down. You can find me there at James D.F. Hanna. And also at my you can find me Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at James D.F. Hanna, and you can find me at my website www.jamesdfhanna.com, because I wanted to keep it simple. And there's a link to on my website. There's a link to my Substack, where I occasionally will write about whatever crosses my mind. It's called That Noise at 2 a.m.
Yeah, someone told me you had a big Substack. So what does the DF stand?
Donald Francis.
I wasn't expecting that. But that's all, it's all good. So what's next? So what's happening now? You've got this out, and your mind must be wandering into some other new ventures.
So I've got this one out. I've got this behind the Calls the Night. It's out June 19th. I have a novella out in a series that Frank Zafiro edits. A Grifters song that's out now. My installment's called Somewhere Outside Salvation, and it takes place back in West Virginia. And it's about two con artists on the run who find themselves pulling a con involving a traveling carnival. There's some Mothman mythos involved in that. I wrote that for Frank and had a lot of fun with that. That was me playing with some carnival noir. And so right now, I'm working on edits on a new book that's takes place in 1976, small town in Kentucky. Two brothers, moonshine, bikers, kind of seeing where it goes with that. Like I said, I've got the first draft done, and we're working on.
Wow, are you doing any book shows or script jobs or anything like that?
We'll probably be at some festivals this year. I'll be at Sleuth Fest down in Boca in July, and I'll be at BoucherCon is that the end of August? Yeah, end of August.
Making the rounds. So, well, now it's time to go. We appreciate you being here. We'll have all of your information up on our website as well. And we're talking about Because the Night. It's a Henry Malone novel, and the writer of that was our guest, Mr. James D.F. Hanna. Thank you for being here.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, James.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This is the introduction of some big media.
I'll be back.